Hey everyone, my name is Alex Duradia. I help people buy, sell, and invest in Kern County. And today we have James Shelby with us. James is an agent out of Temecula. James is somebody I've looked up to ever since I've got into the business. I'm not sure if James knows this or not, but I ran into him at a Mike Ferry event when I went to my very first Ferry event. And I heard about you on a podcast, Pat Hyman Rothstar's podcast. So that was some time ago, I believe. But man, ever since I've followed you on Instagram, you have a great social media and you're just a great person overall. So thank you for taking time out of your day and making this happen, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you, Alex. And I do remember that day, when we met at Mike Ferry and you came up to me, and it was a cool moment, man. I mean, that was a fun moment in time, right? It's weird because I think our lives have seasons, and you don't really realize you're in a season until sometimes it's gone. And that was probably 4 or 5 years ago at this point.
I want to say so, yeah, because I've been selling for about 6 or 7 years, and I think it was about a year later after I got into the business is when I went to Mike Ferry. So yeah. So,
well, you did the right thing, and clearly your willingness to invest in coaching paid off in a big way. I mean, I see you're crushing it every single day, man. So you're doing a great job.
Hey, all I'm gonna say is I'm trying to be like you, buddy. I'm trying to be like you.
Well, hey, man, you might surpass me pretty soon here, so I got to get my butt back into gear.
So I was talking to you the other day, and you had mentioned to me something very important, right? You said you've been you're 10 years in the business now, right? Which is such a massive milestone. So congratulations on that.
I appreciate that.
And the industry average is about 2 years, 3 years when an agent just fails and unfortunately goes out of business. So what I want to ask you is that what kept you in the game so long, right? I mean, tell us about your journey. How did you start? And why not be a loan officer and a real estate agent, or why not switch into a loan officer? Because I'm seeing a lot of people do that. So yeah, man, take it away.
Yeah. So I'll kind of give you the short version. I feel like I've told my story a lot, and maybe I'm just tired of hearing myself talk about it, but I understand people want to know.
Absolutely.
But I'll give you the short version. I've been basically working full time since I was about 15 or 16 years old. I graduated early, just got my GED, and I worked for a family auto glass company. And basically, I would go around to people's homes and replace their windshield or, side glass or whatever. And I had a daughter very young at 19 years old, and I got married very young. And I grew up, my family had a small business, but they were not rich by any means. I grew up in an area called Hemet, California. And if anyone knows Hemet, it doesn't have a great reputation. And I think the average household salary is like $38,000 a year, or something really low. And to this day, it's still very low. So I didn't come from an area with a lot of money. And even my parents, until I was probably about 15, 16, they were very, very lower middle class. And then around 16, my dad's business started to do a little bit better. But right when that happened, the economy went bad a couple of years later. So it was a short-lived kind of success. Yeah. And, my parents were very frugal, they weren't big spenders. So they were able to survive. But I grew up in a 1,200 square foot home. Even when my parents, quote unquote, made it and moved to a little better neighborhood, we had the smallest house in the neighborhood. So, we moved up the hill. Literally, I lived in a neighborhood where we were down below, and the houses were all kind of tiny, 3-bedroom, 1,200 square feet. We moved up the hill, just literally just up the hill. And we had the same layout of our house.
Wow.
They bought the same layout.
Yeah.
So we were surrounded by all these bigger homes on the hill, but for some reason, someone decided to build one of these small homes up there, and that's where we lived. So, it was a humble, growing up, but no crazy money or anything. But I always remember I would ask my mom, because at the time, I was making, I think $27,000 a year. And I would ask my mom, hey, I see these people and they buy these homes that are 800,000 or 900,000. I'm like, how do people do that? They can't all it can't all be doctors and lawyers, you know. And my mom,
Mm.
you know, I love my mom, I love my dad, but they are very, have a certain mindset, you know. And she's like, well, you know, a lot of that's either old money or, you know, people just are married to their job and that's the only way you can make a lot of money, you know, all these things that we hear.
Right.
And it always kind of like, I don't want to say rubbed me the wrong way, but I always thought, you know, that can't be the case, right? There has to be some legitimate people that have a good life, good family, and make good money. And they didn't inherit it either, you know, because that was the other thing. Well, they
Right.
probably inherited money. So, long story short, man, I always kind of had this thing in my head where I knew somehow I was going to make, quote unquote, make it or make some good money. I just didn't know what that was going to be.
Right.
And like I said, I had a baby real young, 19 years old. I had my first daughter. I got married on my 19th birthday. And then fast forward, you know, I was kind of an idiot. I didn't really focus on anything other than just going to work every day and then just kind of, you know, taking care of my family financially. But I was kind of, you know, I was young and stupid, you know, so I wasn't really the best person at that time, you know. So my mindset was just all screwed up and I was lost. You know, I knew I needed to take care of my daughter and my family, but I did eventually, unfortunately, get divorced. And when that happened, you know, I ended up taking my daughter full time because my ex-wife kind of went a little crazy. And I just had that in the back of my mind that something could be better. So I'm giving you a long version. I apologize, but
It's okay, man. It's okay.
essentially,
Yeah, I'm gonna
essentially,
piggyback on something you said, but yeah, go ahead.
okay, I appreciate that. I'll try to stop rambling, but essentially, I really got into real estate when I went to buy my first house.
Okay.
And that was in 2012. I got remarried a couple of years after I got divorced. I got remarried to my wife now. And I when we were buying our first house, and this was in the heart of like the recession, right? It was 2012, I believe, when I started looking for my first house. Everything was a short sale, you know, and I didn't know much about the economy. I didn't follow that. It would, you know, when you're young, you don't even know what that means, really. You know, you
Right.
hear
What is
people
that?
talk about it. What
Right.
is that? You know, I didn't know anything about the housing market. I didn't know anything. But one thing I did know is that I was looking around because you know, I was getting to the age, I just got remarried. I was thinking about maybe buying a house. And I'm like, you know, these houses were like 300,000 or 400,000, and now they're like 120. So I'm like, I don't know what happened or why that is going on, but
Yeah.
if I'm ever going to have an opportunity to buy one, it's going to be right now because I don't
Yeah.
make any money. And
I
I
agree.
think I might have been making a little more money at that time, but maybe 30 or 40 grand or something a
Yeah.
year. So I started the process to buy my own house. And of course, you have a realtor,
Right.
and I was referred to a realtor from a friend, and she was kind of a onesie twosie agent, just like most people, but she was nice and she helped us. And um, that kind of got me interested because I would be driving around doing auto glass and I would see all these homes that were empty and you know, looked like no one lived there, but they were like brand new, but they weren't being taken care of. And I would ask her, like, what's going on with all these houses? And she'd say, well, a lot of people are getting foreclosed on. The market, you know, the economy's bad. And I was like, okay, you know. So I would ask her, I would send her addresses as I drove around, and she would say, you know, that one's actually in foreclosure, because she had, I think, Foreclosure Radar at the time, was some sort of, you know, company
Right.
that you could get numbers and stuff from.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so she would look them up and she would give me the number and say, hey, call the owner and see if they'd be wanting to sell as a short sale. And I'm
You were
like,
doing that? She made you do that?
yes, dude. And I didn't know any better. So I'm like, yeah, cool. Give me their number. I'll call them. So
Right.
I ended up calling because I didn't have no problem talking to people. So I call them and I'd say, hey, you know, I found your house. My realtor gave me your number and they wanted to see if maybe you want to do a short sale. And at some point I handed it off to her, the
Right.
conversation,
Right.
and she
But you
kind of took it from
initiated.
there. I initiated, yeah. So maybe she thought maybe, you know, being a young kid or something, maybe they'd feel like, you know, willing to sell it. I don't know. But I was in throughout that process, I ended up getting her maybe 2 or 3 short sale listings. And because I didn't end up buying those homes for one reason or another. And eventually I ended up buying my own home. And she told me, she's like, you know what? You're good at this. You know, you drive around, you find these homes, you should look into getting your license. So
Wow.
I was like, okay, sure, I'll look into it. I had no idea. I
Yeah.
thought realtors just got paid hourly like everyone else. So I looked it up. I'm like, how does this work? I looked it up online, How Do Realtors Get Paid or something. And that was really when the light bulb went off, because I remember seeing, they get paid a commission, they get paid, 3% of the purchase price. And I started doing the math and I'm like, okay, if I sell $120,000 house and I get $3,000, I only need to sell 1 or 2 homes a month.
$36,000 a year. You're good,
Yeah. So I'm like, I'll be rich, man. I'll be good. I could maybe get up to 50 or 60 grand. I'm going to be rolling in money. And that was it, man. I started to get my license. I closed on my house, which took like 6 months because it was a short sale. I closed on my house and I started the process, and I just never really looked back. Once I got my license, she was kind of far from my area, so I didn't end up working with her, but I ended up working with another guy named Miguel Aguilar, who was kind of a bigger agent. And he was very pivotal in my life because Instagram had just come out at that time. And I started following him, and he was a young guy, maybe a few years older than me, tattoos. He worked out. He had old cars. He had 2 daughters. He had a wife. It was very much successful, he's probably selling 50, 60, 70 homes a year. And I looked at him like, damn, if this guy can do it, I think I could do it. So I reached out to him and I started working on his team, and the rest is kind of history. So that was my very long version. I apologize.
Wow. So no apologize. Thank you. So I'm gonna say something quick about me. So that conversation you had with your mom about you looking at all the houses and you said these people got to have a legitimate job. My dad and I had that very same conversations because we're driving down this neighborhood and I'm like, man, every single one of these people cannot be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer. There has to be other professions in the industry which allows you to make a decent living and live in a nicer home like these, right? And so, yeah, that one really it hit. I agree with you. So, look, 10 years. So you basically made the calls, right? You took a leap of faith and you got into the business, right? How do you feel about the market right now? What are you've seen it? You've seen a lot in 10 years. I know you have. So, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I look back at entering the market at one of the worst times ever, entering the business at one of the worst times ever. And I went into it, they say ignorance is bliss, right? I went into it with excitement. I'm like, this is cool. I can make this money. And every other agent at that time, for the most part, was either getting out of the business or hated it. And I remember my mom, when I told her I was getting my license, she's like, well, you can make good money when the market's good, but what are you going to do? Like, you'll need some sort of real job, when the market's not good. And I'm like, well, I don't know, I think we can figure it out, and
right.
It was funny because people looked around at that time, and rightfully so, because the world seemed like it was falling apart. And, she knew agents that were making $100,000 a year and now they're not making anything, so I definitely understood kind of where she was coming from. But I look at my life, and I think if everyone stops and looks at their life, there's always these pivotal moments where things happen and it can either go one way or another, right? And when I first got my license, I went to the board of realtors in my area, and I might have been 6 months in, and I don't know what I was doing there, maybe getting a lockbox, or I don't know what the heck I was doing, but I ran into someone, and it's a friend of mine to this day. His name is Christian Stone. And he and I were getting our licenses right about the same time. And we just happened to run into each other at the board.
Yeah.
And we didn't know each other, but we introduced each other. And he's like, hey, I got my license right now. I'm like, hey, I just got mine. And that was a pivotal moment because we kind of hit it off, and I said, well, hey, this is what I've been doing. I've been listening to these podcasts, because even before I got into real estate, I would listen to Pat Hyben,
right,
and Tony Salgado. I don't know if you remember him from, I think it was like Super Agents Live.
Yeah.
And then Tim and Julie Harris, the staples, right?
Yeah,
so I was like, hey, I'm listening to these podcasts. You should check them out. And he's like, cool, yeah. And he's like, I'm actually just starting this coaching thing. This guy, Mike Ferry's kind of old guy. You should come and check out an event with me.
No way.
So there was this exchange of information, right? And that was a pivotal moment because, I think a lot of times, especially when you are in a business where, you're direct competition with these other people in your town, And now obviously we know you only need less than 1% of a market share to just crush it. But at the time, you don't know that. And I think a lot of people would have maybe not been willing to share, what they were doing that was helping. But we were both very open and willing to help each other, even though we were, technically competitors.
Yeah.
So I took him up on the offer to go to Mike Ferry, and obviously, you know how that goes. Mike's system is incredible. I started investing in coaching, and my business really took off from there. But sorry, I'm not answering your question, which is what do I think of the current state of the market? And I think I'm excited. I think we need to, as agents, we've been spoiled, and I know I've been spoiled with building a great sphere and getting business through social media, and we've been spoiled over the past couple of years. But I do think we're now in a market where we should be trying to find that excitement that we had when we first got in the business, and really get back to the roots of what we know works. And for that, I'm very excited.
Yeah. No, and you did answer the question, right? I mean, a lot of people, technically you left the business when you got in, right? And I'm starting to see that also. But what I'm also starting to see is newer agents walk into my office and they're like, Alex, we're excited. Like, let's do this. And I'm sitting there thinking, God, what is this guy thinking, right? Worst time to enter the market. So I had to work on my mindset, right? Connect with my coach about that and talk about that. Like, this kid is so excited that he's going to make all this money. He's going to work hard. He's going to get sales. And she's like, Alex, you were that kid when you started in that business, right? You need to go back to that mentality. Like just like you said, you need to go back to basic. You were spoiled from social medias, referrals from past client, and just deals coming in left and right. So now I'm going back to basics. Before we jumped on the call, I was making my just call for 3 hours. I hit my 30. Yeah. We bumped that number up. So yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, what are you dealing with a little bit of mindset struggle as well right now, or how's that thing looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even towards the beginning of 2022, this year,
yeah,
I was rocking and rolling.
Oh.
I think I came into January with like 10 escrows, all really high prices. I made almost, 130 grand or something in the first month. So things were moving, man. And then, April, May really hit a wall, right? Yeah. And it was a struggle, so I drug my way through the rest of the year, and, I just joined a new brokerage. So that's given me kind of a reinvigorated sense of excitement, and that was part of the reason. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I switched, but that was another reason, is I needed some more excitement, right? And not that your brokerage dictates your business, but the opportunities at this brokerage and the things that I have planned to do here, including, doubling down on production, is very exciting. So I'm just, I was with my previous broker for 6 years or something like that. I'm not the type of person to jump around.
Yeah.
I really, I'd seen the opportunity to come to this brokerage for a long time, but I'm just not the type to chase shiny objects. I don't think that they're the answer to all the problems, but right. I moved to Real Brokerage, which provides just such an incredible opportunity, especially for agents that have been in the business for a long time. So I'm very excited about the market. I'm excited because this is a time, if you're an agent like yourself that works, that you can gobble up market share, because all the agents that are leaving, all the agents that are shrinking back is because they don't know what to do, because what they were doing isn't working anymore and they never got into prospecting. They're kind of, deer in headlights. So it's exciting. Like, anyone that's willing to work is going to thrive, and then that's going to feed them, for the next 5 years or so, because the market will pick up again at some point, probably sooner rather than later. I would anticipate, or at least hope. And even if it doesn't, if you work hard, you're going to be fine.
So we're talking about market condition and mindset, right? What are you doing to, in 2021, we all had a career year, great numbers, great commission, great sales. 2022 was a great start, but halfway through the year, it kind of like got a little bumpy, and I'll be honest, I had to drag myself through the last half or last few months because I was just like, what the heck just happened, right? And it's my first downturn. I mean, I've only been in it for 6, 7 years, so I don't know what it looks like. But I am excited, like you said. So what are you how are you planning on tackling this market going forward?
Just going back to the basics, I mean, being in the business for 10 years, I mean, yes, I primarily only know an ascending market where things are going up, but there's been plenty of lulls in the market in the past 10 years, and even when I was in the business in 2015, 16, 17,
It wasn't
we're
easy back then.
complaining. It wasn't easy, and we're complaining now, because we are so short-sighted as human beings that when we go from we list the house on Friday, it sells on Sunday, and we get paid 25 days from there because we negotiated a shorter escrow. When that stops happening, we all of a sudden think the world is falling apart. But for anyone that's only been in the business a couple of years, I mean, there's so many times I remember where you would list a home and you would go over average days on market when you're sitting down with your client, when you're going through your listing presentation, and the average days on market could have been 60 days, and that was just normal, And so, I think what we're in right now, it's a weird market, but in a lot of ways, it's just a very normal market where you list a home, it sits on the market for a couple of weeks, you get a few showings, there's maybe an offer or two rolls in, and there's some negotiating back and forth, the seller doesn't have all the leverage anymore. And then, you sell the home and it takes a little longer. And I think that we need to understand that we have to keep our head out of the news and the doom and gloom stuff, because what we're in now and where we're heading, in my opinion, based on everything that I can see, is just a normal market. And so everyone wants to freak out because homes aren't going up $20,000 every 10 minutes,
Right?
But
No, I agree. I absolutely agree.
this is just normal, and yeah, we've taken a little dip, but there is no way that you can sustain the amount of growth that the housing industry has had over the past year to two. It's just not sustainable. So anyone that thought that it was going to continue forever was, living with their head in the sand. So I think moving forward, it's just about getting back to the basics, over educating the client and potential clients. And I think not only getting back to prospecting and those avenues I think are extremely important, but I'm going to double down on client education, and potential client education. So more videos, more YouTube, more social media. I'm going to dedicate time in the schedule, because I don't want it to take away from prospecting, but I do want to dedicate time to where I'm double and tripling down on the information that I'm supplying to my marketplace, because in times of turbulence, I think that clients and people that are thinking about either buying or selling look to the leaders in the industry, in the area. And if you're the one that's constantly popping up when they're trying to find information about the local area, I think you're more than likely going to snag those people. And when you marry, I've always said this, when you can marry social media with prospecting and you can live in harmony with those two things, I think really that's the golden ticket right there. The prospecting should be your foundation where you build your house. And then as you build and you add the framing and all that and the painting, my opinion, that should be your social media marketing. So never get away from your foundation, have a strong foundation, and then build the rest of the house on top of it. And you really can't go wrong, in my opinion.
Great analogy, man. Yeah, that one, I love that. That's a great analogy. I absolutely agree. I mean, you have to be a leader going forward. You have to stick to the basics and work on that foundation, if not anything more. And I think you combine that with social media, you're hitting home runs left and right. I think that's definitely so. Being in the business for so long, there's a lot of people entering the business, lenders and loan officers and lender, loan officer, same thing. But a lot of people entering the business, lenders and agents. So what advice do you have for them going forward? Beside, hey, get to the basic, right? I don't think they know any difference. How should they navigate the market?
Well,
Like, what would you do if you
obviously
got in?
What's that?
What would you do if it was your day one?
I hate to keep hammering the same stuff, but I mean, I would really just go back to what I did at the very beginning, which is, I got my first deal ever from door knocking. And the funny thing about that deal was it was a buyer. Usually when you think about door knocking, you think about getting listings, but I knocked on a door where they just happened to be renting and happened to be talking about buying a home. And that was my first deal ever. Wow. So, if I was a brand new agent right now, you cannot go wrong, in my opinion, if you have the ability. And I know it's tricky when you're a new agent because, when I was a new agent, I couldn't go full-time into real estate. I had to work my regular job. Then when I would get off work, I would put a suit on and go door knock for 2 or 3 hours after I got off work. And I would do that on Saturday and Sunday. So I think if you're a new agent, you just have to kind of understand that you're probably, and I hate to say this, unless you've got a lot of money saved up, you're probably going to have to work much more than you probably want to. But if you put in the work, it's going to be worth it. So
you still door knock actively?
So COVID put kind of a kibosh on the door knocking, unfortunately, for a little bit. Now that we're pretty much, everyone has kind of accepted that I think we're out of it, hopefully. I just started going back to door knocking. And I'll tell you a funny story about that. I was door knocking about 2 weeks ago, first time in 2.5 years. And within 45 minutes, I had 3 great conversations, collected information, email, address, name, and they weren't moving tomorrow, but each one of them said 3 to 6 months, a year tops, we're thinking about making a move. So obviously we want now business, but that's 3 more people I've added into my database. I use HomeBot, which if there's an agent out there and you're not using HomeBot, definitely look into it. Basically what it does is it sends a homeowner a CMA every month branded from you. Yeah. And it's the way I look at it is it's better than them going to Zillow to try to figure out what their home is worth. If they're getting something from you every month that's automated and you don't really have to think about it, I think that's the best thing to do. And those are, I put people on there, my sphere, everyone I put in there. But if it's a lead that's 6 months or a year away, obviously they're not going to be top of mind. So I stick them in there. If it's a lead that says we're selling in 2 weeks or 3, a month, then obviously that's going into follow up, and I'm going to follow up much sooner. But I think agents just need to have conversations every single day with people that they don't already know about buying or selling real estate. And I know that sounds too simple to be true, but that's kind of really what you got to do.
I agree, man. So one of my very first deal came from cold calling. So ever since then, I've been like in love with cold calling because it was a home run for me. And I double-ended that deal. And ever since then, nice. I'm like, what do I got to do? Who am I calling, right? So and
that's just proof. You and I are proof that it works, right? Because I think a lot of people, especially nowadays, every ad you see, everything that's geared towards agents, every YouTube video is, hey, this is how you sell 100 homes without making a cold call or knocking on a door, and I'm sure there's some way to do that, but it's probably going to cost you a lot of money, or you're going to have to really learn some type of skill, like building some huge YouTube channel. And that's going to take time in and of itself. So, yeah. I have no problem with people that want to do that type of stuff.
Yeah. Just knock on a door or pick up a phone. It's a whole lot easier, I think, one last thing we're running.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I wanted to. I was just. Go. I'll wait.
You got the delay. I'm sorry, man. I was just gonna say, I don't have any problem with all the technology. I think that I know based on my own experience, I've probably made 300 grand. I tallied it up It was roughly about $300,000 in GCI from leads from Instagram over the last 8 years. So I know that that stuff works. I would never advise someone to get away from that. It just has to be in addition to what you're already doing, which is like we talked about, laying the foundation. And the things like building a YouTube channel about your area and all that, I think all that really works. And I started doing that about 8 months ago, and I've got 4 or 5 calls from it already, which is not a lot, but I can see how it will compound over time. So I would tell people, do those things on the side and build those things out, because they will pay dividends, but never get away from the prospecting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, absolutely. One last thing I wanted to ask you was investment in your real estate career. What are your thoughts about rentals, and have you invested over the years?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've always thankfully been around people that told me, hey, I've been in the business a long time. This is what you need to do in order to set yourself up for later in life. So I have bought, right now, I have a couple rental properties, and I'm building an Airbnb right now. They're all in Montana. I live in California, but they're all in Montana. And that's definitely a big goal. And to be honest, if I could give anyone advice on that side of things, I would say, buy as many homes as you can. I wish I would have bought more, because, things just keep going up, up, up. So, over the past 10 years, I probably could have acquired much more real estate, but, you don't really understand or maybe realize that when you're in it. The house I'm living in right now at one point sold for like $250,000. I bought it for $400,000, and now it's worth $725, so at the time, at some point, someone should have hung on to that house, so,
yeah,
you can't go wrong. But my big goal is to obviously keep buying rentals and keep focusing on not blowing my money and spending it on stuff that's going to pay me down the road. But again, that's another reason why I'm pretty stoked about where I'm going as far as the brokerage side of things, because the brokerage, real brokerage allows you to make money on a lot of different avenues throughout real estate, other than just trading your time for a commission check. So there's a lot of different things that I'm doing, real estate investing, the real brokerage side, to try to offset some of just, I don't want to be in production when I'm 60 years old. God love any of these agents that are still cold calling and door knocking at that age, but I personally don't want to be one of them. So, I'm trying to set everything up to where at some point, I can do something else,
So James,
automated.
Did someone get a hold of you if they want to find out a little bit more about real brokerage or what you're talking about, or if they have any questions about the market, or if they want to get ahead, just put some information out, man.
Yeah, obviously, I'm excited about where I just went. So I don't want to be one of those guys that all I do is talk about real brokerage. But, if someone genuinely has a question about it, I'm always there to answer it.